You've seen me use pencil, you've seen me use pen, paints, and even markers, but it seems that I just keep coming back to those acrylic inks. Today, we're going to explore some of the incredible highlights that I've faced with the acrylic inks so far and why I'm so obsessed with them. Now, if you're new to art, it's no surprise that the struggle to find the right medium for you is definitely real. Most of us start with the absolute basics, right? Like a number 2 pencil and a sketchbook. Maybe something that you pulled from the back of the closet, or even a quick purchase at the dollar store. Eventually, we do upgrade, and we keep upgrading and upgrading and upgrading. I'm not gonna lie, it's a known thing when it comes to art. You want to try every single medium there is, and suddenly your collection just keeps growing. So if you are going to pick up the endeavor of art as a hobby, just know that your closet is going to be stuffed in the next couple of years. Like I was saying, eventually we do upgrade, maybe to what I would define as the generic art supplies. And yes, I am doing air quotations. This is usually, the fine liners, alcohol markers, watercolor, acrylic paints, the usual suspects. But the further along you go and the more art supplies that you begin to collect, you start to do other trendier things like the gouache paints when it was a new rave, or the acrylic markers that are extremely popular right now, maybe even some sculpting. And while acrylic inks have slowly been on the rise, especially with all the fast pace like social media and the introduction to the acrylic ink pours, they're still often overlooked, I find. I'm here to tell you why they shouldn't be. We're also going to be revisiting an older sketch that I did back at the end of March that I've named Synthetic Plant. There's a fun little story to it, and you can actually check out the drawing of the speed painting that I did that I will be attaching to the end of this video. Now, let's be clear, acrylic inks aren't actually brand new. They've been around on the market for quite some time, and you're probably already familiar with one of the older ones, the more traditional cousin, Indie inks. The popular brand like Dr. P.H. Martin. While they are both fluid inks and can seem similar at first glance, they are actually somewhat different. Two of the main things that I have found is, one, the color variations that are provided with the acrylic inks compared to the indie inks. There are limited color palettes when it comes to the indie inks because of how their binding formula works. Compared to the acrylic inks, there's a little bit more of a wider range of opportunities of colors and gradients. So what is making me love these so much, and why do I think you should try them? I'm going to list the top 5 reasons why I love these and why acrylic inks are such a game changer. If you are into mixed media or illustration and you haven't had the opportunity to use these yet, prepare to fall head over heels, because here are 5 reasons why you will absolutely love these beauties. Now, going into the painting, I already knew the color palette and color scheme that I wanted to use with this one. So before I even began, I made sure that I was cut off a couple of pieces of paper in order to begin to do a little bit of a swatch test while I mixed the color. Since the color didn't exist already within my color palette, I wanted that pre-done beforehand, so that way it was easy for me to grab the color and then add it on as I went. Now, there are 2 specific colors that I wanted to use, and I wanted to stay with a very monochrome theme when it came to this painting. So I used more of an orange red for the sky, and then a kind of like a teal emerald green color for the rest of the painting. There is a border for this piece, but I did have certain sections that broke away from the border. So I actually ended up taking washi tape and taking washi tape and an X-Acto knife and cutting out the sections that were going to be exposed and had access to the ink, while sealing off the areas that I wanted to make sure stayed white for the border. Now, the first thing that I did was I began painting the sky and the back layers using the orange red and using again that gradient wash technique in order to get saturated colors in specific areas and then blending it up towards so that way it was a little bit more muted. Number 1, vibrancy that does not stop popping. Forget dull, forget muted tones. These These little bottles pack quite a bit of a punch. They're vibrant, they're saturated, they are crazy insane with super intense pigments. I find personally they are perfect for working in layers and washes. For me, layering is what truly adds dimension to my pieces. And a little goes a long, long way. The ability to add transparent layers over layers gives me the incredible control over the color gradients and the shadows and the blending that no other product has been able to touch to date. But even adding that dilution to them by watering it down, it still has this vibrancy that speaks volumes. Sometimes it's like the color literally jumps off the pages. Now there's a moon in the background that I still wanted to have a little bit of a light source to. So that's why I wanted to make sure that the bottom was a little bit more saturated compared to the moon as it traveled up. Before applying the first layer of the emerald green, I again knew that I wanted to use more of transparent layers and begin layering the color tones from there. I used a dropper for the ink and water before mixing it together and testing it on a spare piece of paper to make sure that the transparency level was what I wanted for the ink. Using the transparent wash, I started to apply the emerald blue-green to the canvas for the first layer and made sure that it was fully saturated in all areas of the canvas. I also went back in and marked off the darker parts of the non-diluted form of the emerald blue-green for some of the parts that I knew that I wanted to make sure were at its darkest point. Reason number 2, they're extremely versatile. And I'm not talking about the layering potential for the transparent washes or even the opaque layers when you choose not to dilute it. These inks can go from super fine lines to stains to airbrushing to full out pours. It is effortless to switch from bold and dynamic colors to the tiniest paintbrush for those delicate details that add that extra little pop. And because they dry so fast, you don't have to worry about the underlayer washing away like watercolor does. Which brings me to my next point. Now you can see a little bit of a close-up of me applying the wash to get the color gradient from dark to light and adding a little bit of yellow highlights for the concentration of light from the back to the building and the trees and the stump. Now because this is from my imagination, I really had to play around with where this light source was going to be able to hit and where it wasn't. The plants also have a little bit of a luminosity to them, so I also had to take that into account when applying these colors. For the luminosity of the plant, I did apply more of a non-diluted form of the yellow to around the plant and then used water to fade it out to give it a little bit more of a glowing feel to the picture, and just kept fanning it out until I was happy with the consistency and kind of how it looked. The back part was a little bit harder for me because I knew that it needed to have highlights that reflected a little bit of the night sky. But it also needed to be shrouded in darkness. So the first thing that I did was I ended up going in with a little bit of the yellow and then applying a little bit of the orange in the areas that I knew that the light source was going to be the strongest. Once I was satisfied with how the layout looked with that, I went back in with the emerald blue-green color that I had mixed up and then started adding in the shadow work that I wanted to apply, slowly building the layers again to get that consistency that I was looking for the more concentrated areas of the shadow and then fading it out towards more of the light source. This helped out because it caused the colors to not mix together but gave it still transition from the shadow to the light areas. Because this is from the imagination, I really had to play around with where the light source was coming from and how it would actually play against the buildings. So I took this a little bit slower when I was doing this and just, applying a little bit of a layer, stepping back, having a quick look at it. Where would the concentrated colors be? And just kind of going from there and until I was satisfied with how it looked. Point number 3, it's permanent. I don't know about you, but for me, patience isn't always my virtue when it comes to creating and drawing, at least with not waiting around. Personally, I do not have the time to sit around and watch paint dry like with the acrylic paints. I even have a blow dryer specifically dedicated, so when I do acrylic paintings, I can use the heat source to speed up the drying process. But even that takes a little bit of time off of my plate. Acrylic inks dry super fast, so you can literally layer till your heart's content without waiting forever or worrying about it smudging. Once they're dry, they are permanent and they are waterproof. And that works perfect for me. Now, when I was a beginner artist, I did start off with watercolor, but one thing that always did annoy me was how quick that they reactivated when it was wet. That usually resulted in either muddy colors or, those fine details that I wanted to add in being a little bit more smudgier than I wanted them to be. With these, though, I don't have to stress about my underlayers lifting or moving around on me. Speaking of smudgy lines, this brings me to my next point. Number 4. Precision is power. If you are a fan of intricate details, you absolutely need these inks in your life. They're thin, silky smooth, and with the consistency that flows beautifully. They make fine, intricate work a little bit easier and more of a breeze. Think crisp lines and delicate touches. Now, for the painting, I knew that I wanted to color the coin in the yellow color because I wanted it to be so as you were looking at the full piece, your eyes would almost travel within a pattern from the top of the image down to the bottom. Once I was done coloring it and adding in, some of the highlighted areas, leaving those areas white, and then just building up a little bit of the darker tones by mixing the yellow and the orange along with the blue to cool it down for a little bit of the shadow work within the coin. Once I was done that, I did find that it was a little bit too much of a pop that I wanted, which kind of took away from the piece. So I did end up covering it later on in the video with a lighter wash of the blue to kind of push it back into the background as well and make it blend in more with its surrounding areas. And if you can't get the detail that you're looking for, this brings me to my final point. Point 5, they play nicely with everyone else. This is where the fun really begins for mixed media artists. Acrylic inks play wonderfully with almost everything. They're perfect for combining watercolor, gouache, markers, color pencils, pastels, and the list probably goes on. I just haven't touched other mediums with it. They even work beautifully with other acrylic paints, either as a vibrant base layer or adding precise lines and details on top. It is truly a versatile medium that I am obsessed with, and the more that I explore with these, the more in love that I am with them. Every opportunity that I have to touch or play or what else can it do, I am itching to find out and experiment with them. Now, this is where the fun begins, because this is really where the versatility of the acrylic inks come into play. Before I even began, I knew that I wanted to do a little bit more of a mixed media effect towards this. So I did end up taking a black and white pencil crayon and going back over the entire sketch, making sure that I had a sharp point for everything and just really defining where the darkest darks are going to be, as well as where the highlights are going to be. This also allowed me to kind of go back in and place highlights that I might have mistakenly covered up during the time of the inking process and just blend it out smoothly where it all integrated together into the painting. I was also able to use a calligraphy pen, which I did end up going over to really add in those solid white highlights, just to add that extra punch, especially within the main plant, because I wanted to give that illusion that the cybernetics within the plant were kind of glowing. If you want to know the backstory to the painting, you can check out the YouTube video that I had recently posted. I'm going to put it to the end of the video, like I had mentioned before. So if you do want to see the beginning stages to the end where I create the sketch, you are more than welcome. It also comes with a cool backstory. There was, though, a defining moment when I used these for the first time that I had my breakthrough moment. Have you ever had one of those art supplies that just impacts your artwork like crazy? Like the acrylic inks have really transformed how I do art and how I look at art. For years, I was really focused on trying to use watercolor in my works because I love the idea of how soft the blending effects were when it came to the watercolor and the brushwork. And it was something that I found that acrylic paints was a challenge and slow to achieve when it came to the blending, especially when you're using like a full body or heavy body acrylic paint. So with the viscosity of the watercolor, it drew more of my attention towards it. But because of that, I struggled. Watercolor activates so easily, and I found that it was hard to get those crisp lines that I wanted, or to make sure that, the color stayed where I wanted it to stay. I wanted to be able to layer and work with colors right on the canvas. Especially when I'm doing like a quick drawing, like I don't have the time to sit and do a color gradient scale or planning like I've done in this one. So the fact that the watercolor moved caused it to dull out my paints, and it caused it to become muddy so quickly. I wanted something more vibrant, something more permanent, where it all blended together, where I got that smoothness effect, but at the same time I could add colors on top of colors and not have to worry about, my painting mysteriously disappearing. Then one day I was using the indie ink for a black and white piece that I was doing, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And honestly, the moment that the ink hit the paper, it was like a lightning bolt went off. So down the rabbit hole, I just, had to venture. I had already seen the Bombay inks before in various, YouTube videos, or a lot of the tattoo flash art were used with the Bombay inks. But the indie ink that I had wasn't of the best quality, so I don't believe that I got the full spectrum of what the Bombay inks could do. And because it wasn't of the best quality, sometimes it would reactivate, and it would always do it at the most inconvenient times, which would throw off my painting. But then, the wheel started turning. Okay, well, if the India inks can do this and I just need a little bit more stability, what else is there that I haven't been able to stumble upon? So further research was required and needed, and I continued down the rabbit hole. That's when I stumbled upon the acrylic inks, and it was purely by accident. But the more that I used them, the more I fell in love with them, and the more that I fell in love with them, and the more I'm loving them over time. They gave me the fluidity that I was craving from the watercolor, but with the permanency and the vibrancy and the punch of the acrylics. And the fact that I am able to seamlessly mix them with other mediums like the acrylic paints helps out as well. And it makes me more intrigued at what other capabilities that it can do. Especially with recently, I've picked up the coloring pencils as well. And I'm finding that, because I've tried to use coloring pencils with acrylic paints before, and I found that regardless of if, the pencil was a little bit more chalky or it was more of an oil-based pencil, that the paint almost rejected it, or it would pool almost, and it just didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. But with the acrylic inks, they lay seamlessly as if you're drawing on paper. And this is going to truly open up so many doors for me in the future and what it's capable of doing. As we come to the end of the video, I kind of just want to recap everything that I talked about and my 5 main points on why I think you should actually give these a shot and give these a try. 1, the vibrancy and the pop that these inks give is absolutely magical. 2, they are extremely versatile. You can go from coloring in the entire page with diluted tones to mixing it in with like a non-diluted form to give it that saturated color. You can go from fine liner to stains, and there's just endless possibilities with these. And it gives that watercolor effect without you having to worry about it lifting, which again, is permanent, which is number 3. If you are like me and really like to build up your paintings from layer to layer, this is great. It's because it's permanent, and it's going to last too, because the light fastness within these are pretty strong. It gives you that versatility to be able to work slowly and build up as much detail as you possibly want within it. Which brings me to point 4. Precision is power. If you Like these are crisp lines and they don't flow the same way as say watercolor would, where it kind of has a mind of its own. These ones you can have a little bit more control over it depending on how much water that you do add, but still gives you that ability to have those crisp lines and still be able to fade it out the way that you would with traditional watercolor. And of course, as you can see, they really do play nicely with others. I've used them with watercolor, I've used them with marker, I've used them with colored pencils. These are fantastic. You can literally just keep building and building and building until you can't anymore. Unlike other paints, it doesn't reject a lot of the dry material, so it just allows you to be able to go on top of it over and over again without you destroying your liner pen or marker or anything like that. The more I use these, I truly do I'm falling in love with them. I really recommend. I do want to check out some of the Bombays and the Indie inks to see how they compare, because I didn't find too much of a difference except for like how they're bonded together, but it would be interesting to see how they play with one another. I also find that because I have different sketchbooks, so I have maybe 3 or 4 on the go. And the reason why is because they all have different types of paper. So one's a mixed media, one's a watercolor, one is more for pencils and pens. But even with the pencil and the pen one, because it dries so quickly, it really does allow you to be able to layer in on even the finer piece of paper. I wouldn't go wet on wet per se, too many layers with those ones there, but because they do dry quite quickly, like it's easier for me to, build even within those sketchbooks with the paper that is not necessarily meant for, wet material. And they don't bleed through either, which is weird. It's interesting. But I do believe that is enough. That is all for me for today. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you plan to use these, let me know. I got to figure out a way, because I would love to see your guys' artworks. If you guys are planning to ever use these or want to share your artworks, I got to figure out how to do that. But let me know what you think of the video. Let me know if you've tried them yourself, what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear it. And stay tuned for the next one, because we're going to be jumping into a different medium that I've been strongly avoiding because they are so popular. But I do want to give them a little bit of a test run. And I got a deal on them. So why not just add to the, as I was saying before, add to the growing list of art supplies that run rampant in my closet. But other than that, yeah, go touch paint. Bye.